ziua și bine ați venit la un nou episod al Check Bank Pentru Afaceri Românești. Eu sunt Roxana Petrescu, gazda dumneavoastră de astăzi, iar alături de mine prin Zoom este Mark Beacom, CEO al Black Sea Oil and Gas. Black Sea Oil and Gas este al treilea producător de gaze din România, cu o cotă de piață de 10%. Aflăm ce plănuiește de aici încolo. Hello Mark, welcome.
Hello Roxana.
Nice to see you again. So let's start this by the simplest question. How was 2025 for you, operationally speaking? Were there any challenges concerning the media project?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because 2025 and globally it's not been an easy year. Politically, geopolitically, financially, commercially, all sorts of crazy things happening. But in our world, our little world, 2025 was very smooth. Our operation has been in the Black Sea has been up and running for over 3 years. We still haven't missed one day of a nomination to our buyer. We've never had, from an HSSE point of view, any LTIs. The project has been running very smoothly. Of course, there are some challenges. We still have issues with potential, floating mines and now floating drones. Things do happen where we have problems offshore, but we have a very, very good team, and we've never seen, as I said, we haven't had one day of a safety issue or a commercial issue. So things are going very well for us in 2025.
How much were you able to produce this year?
It's been absolutely flat since we came on in June 2022. It's a plateau, and for 2025 and for 2026 remains the same. It's about 107 million standard cubic feet a day of gas.
For how many years do you think you will be able to sustain this production?
Yeah, on the plateau, we definitely have one more year. The reservoir appears to be, since we've started, bigger than we anticipated. Deliverability has always been phenomenal. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how the data goes and how well the onshore compression works, because we've been free flowing most of our existence. It's only recently that we've actually turned on the compressor. But I know for 2026 we'll be fine. We'll see for the next year after.
Mm-hmm. You said at the beginning of your intervention that 2025 was a rich year in events and challenges. Could you tell me which were the ones that caught your eye and influenced your business?
Well, there's so many to choose from. I guess what influences our business now that we're moving on to green energy is where's the EU going to go with green energy? Is there the political will to continue on this path of decarbonization? Given that the US and other countries are pulling back, potentially it puts the EU in a competitive disadvantage, industrially speaking, if it's going one path where others are going on a more, the cheaper the better as far as energy production. So when we look at our green projects, we are quite concerned about whether the EU will stick with its decarbonization plans.
Do you think there's a possibility of going back, because the main issue of the EU, that of being dependent of energy imports, will become even bigger if we decide to go backwards from the decarbonization plan?
Yeah, that part it's correct. I think it still makes sense from an energy security point of view. It always has, that the EU has been so vulnerable, and that they should be doing everything they can to ensure that there's energy security. And that does, in some respects, line up with decarbonization, but not all. For instance, for Romania in particular, natural gas still has a lot of potential, but it's somewhat in conflict of a long-term decarbonization strategy. And I would suggest it's important to continue using natural gas and developing natural gas for Romania, but also for the EU.
What major changes do you foresee for the Romanian gas market with the Neptune Deep, for example, coming online in less than 2 years? I mean, we're talking about more than 8 billion cubic meters of production, additional to what we have. How do you see these volumes changing the market and maybe the regional market?
Well, certainly Romania will be awash in gas, and it looks clear that it'll become a net exporter, which in my view is a good thing. It's healthy for the economy to have full self-sufficiency in gas, and then be able to have the luxury of exporting and making huge revenues for the state. The question is, where's it all going to go? And I think because there's a recognition that the gas has to flow, and it will probably cross borders, that there has to be decent connectivity in order for Romania to sell its gas outside of its borders.
Mm-hmm. So majorly exports, because we are...
I don't know how major. Yeah.
We are still hanging on the idea, although in 2 years I don't know what's there to be done, to be able somehow to consume locally these quantities. But 8 billion cubic meters in 2 years, it seems rather impossible. But what do you think? Do you see any opportunities for it to be consumed here?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting philosophy, and I think it's a bit old school, to be honest. I think it comes back from many decades ago, that you have to match the molecules. That somehow, if you don't match the producing molecules with the consumption molecule in country, you've failed. You've missed an opportunity. And the rest of the world doesn't quite look at it that way, particularly the ones that have been very, very successful. I mean, you look at the most wealthy countries per capita, so the citizens themselves have enjoyed the wealth. Norway, they don't care that they export. They're happy to export. They're not trying to match every molecule of oil and gas they make and try and build, fertilizer plants and gas-fired power generation. That's not a concern for them. Qatar is probably now one of the wealthiest countries per capita, and their gas flows. And really, I think the best way for a country to look at it, a country that has the luxury that Romania has, is get this production going. Absolutely produce it. Don't be so concerned with the consumption side, because gas and production doesn't just pay corporate tax like all other businesses. We pay the corporate tax. It's on 16% on profits. But we also pay a revenue tax, the royalties, no matter whether we're successful or not. And it's a big chunk of money. And then there's the supplemental tax, kind of a windfall tax on top of that. So producing gas in Romania is highly, highly lucrative for the state. It's a really good business. And the best thing to do is encourage it, be awash in cash rather than fight the budget every year, actually have huge surpluses. And then the state, the country decides, well, where do we want to invest? Do we need to invest in energy consuming industries, or, how about, I don't know, medicine or IT or anything else? It doesn't have to be matched. Take the money and use it for the benefit of the country. So I think that philosophy needs to be changed.
We see a lot of development in the Black Sea region around the gas topic. I mean, we see Greece gaining very much importance in the topic of regional security. We see investments in interconnectors. Also in Bulgaria, we see explorations in the Black Sea. What do you think the outcome of all this, I don't know, action will be in the, let's say, 5 years for this region?
Well, I think if they're successful, they'll take the position that Romania should have been having, had the ability to have, which is energy contributor to the EU. And my past comments about producing gas and making lots of revenue for the state is one argument. But honestly, the other one that's really important is if you're a country that supplies energy, which is a real security issue, if you supply energy to someone else, you have power over them. I mean, some people exploit that power. Russia is famous for that. But if Romania was a huge producer of gas and exporting it, the buyers of that gas or oil, but it's gas in the case of Romania, the buyers of that, in a negotiation or if things are going a little rough between the neighbors, there's an advantage. There's an inherent advantage, and Romania should have had that. Bulgaria is certainly working to find the next Neptune Deeps. They've got 2 concessions being drilled. Greece is now, it's taken them a while, but they came from a big sea without any seismic, without any history of production, and who knows, maybe we'll see that the Ionian does bear fruit. But again, I think all of that was an inherent advantage that Romania had, and it's unfortunately didn't exploit it, and still isn't.
Coming back to your portfolio in Romania, besides the production of gas that made you our third largest producer with that 1 billion cubic meter, you also got involved in other energy projects like biomethane, for example. Can you tell us what's the status of this development? Which are the challenges? How does your portfolio look like in this moment?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is something we really took a real run at in 2025, and we're continuing into the future here. And if I just pull back a little bit, we were looking at where's our next bet in Romania, because Black Sea Oil and Gas is a Romanian-focused company. So we have some other prospects offshore in the Black Sea that obviously would be very keen to move forward. We're also open for business if there's stranded gas that could be brought back, and those discussions have ebbed and flowed, a lot to do with politics and mostly. But where we thought elsewhere we could get a lot of traction is a green energy. And we really took a good look at all the different ideas that would make sense for us. We came to the conclusion that onshore solar and onshore wind didn't make sense for us because we had no competitive advantage. The people playing in that market today are very good, and we wouldn't be able to compete with them, and they're doing very well. So we decided not to go for that. Offshore wind makes perfect sense for us because we're an offshore developer, and we have the energy corridor, and we did a deep dive on the potential for wind in the Black Sea, and where our infrastructure, our energy corridor, our onshore lands, our reception facility could unlock those offshore wind development areas. And we came up with a number of 6 gigawatts. So huge potential. Unfortunately, offshore wind is very, very expensive. I don't know if we'll ever, we're there to, if it's going to happen, we'll be the developer of choice, but it's a real financial challenge. So we also looked at and are looking at carbon capture. Our infrastructure, the MGD infrastructure, puts us really in the first tier of carbon capture and storage projects globally. We've also done a deep dive technically on that, and we see that the types of infrastructure that we have, the integrity of it, how it's designed, all of that could be repurposed. Our wells and our reservoir, the Anna Reservoir, just coincidentally, somewhat fortuitously, work very, very good for carbon capture. And we're right next door to emitters. We don't need to put stuff on ships and cryogenic and then have all this risk and costs of moving it around. So if we don't have anything else that comes through our MGD infrastructure in terms of gas, natural gas, we have the ability to pivot to carbon capture. And we've got a very compelling story, and I say in rank globally, I think we've got one of the potentially one of the best stories. But that we'll wait to see how we're doing. That's going to be a longer play, but a real one. So biomethane, yes, we like the biomethane story. We did a lot of work again with like the other ones. We did a lot of research. We put people on the ground because biomethane, the data is not good. Desktop studies really don't do it justice. So, the 41 counties in Romania, we're out there. We're actually trying to look on the ground. Biomethane basically is 80% an agriculture story, and we're an energy company. So we need to partner with very strong agro players, and we need to see a number of dynamics, a lot of dynamics that have to come together to make it a good story. And we like what we saw. We also like the fact that Romania is ranked number 4 in terms of feedstock potential, but there's yet to be one biomethane plant because of the regulatory blockages, and that deters competition. It doesn't deter us. So, we had the MGD project with much more challenges, and we got through them. So our view is to move aggressively to find the best sites, to move forward to FID as we can, and in parallel, we'll fix the regulatory issues. I mean, it just makes so much sense for the country to be supportive of biomethane. So we have announced 2 sites. We made a public announcement on them. One, the very first one, and so let's talk about that one because it's important as it's first. Is we are partnered with Deneagra, which is the biggest milk producer in Europe and in the EU, and it's in the county of Alba. And we have a project. We have a project with them that should generate over, we see over 20 megawatts of biomethane. So in biomethane terms, that's a very big project. You see a lot of biomethane plants in Europe, sort of 2 or 3 megawatts. So this is a big project. It has all the dynamics that make it a compelling project that should be able to get regulatory approval. And we just need, however, the regulatory framework to be put in place. But we see FID on that one maybe third quarter of next year.
How big is the investment in this?
It's looking like about 35 million euros.
And the investment is split between you two?
No, we're the developer. So
okay.
Deneagra they're providing the access to the lands. So we have lands that are right next door to their processes, which is one very important aspect of a biomethane plant as far as logistics are concerned. They're helping us get through the permitting process. But they're locked in. I mean, they've locked in with us with a long-term feedstock supply of cow manure. It's a dairy farm, and they're also going to handle the digestate, the what happens after the biomethane plant. You have biomethane, and then you have the product that comes out afterwards, which is basically a biofertilizer, and they will handle that. So we're very integrated commercially, but as far as building this facility, it's all on our shoulders.
And they will buy the production of the plant?
The gestate, no, that's part of the deal. It's theirs, and sometimes if you don't do it right, it's actually a nuisance. You know, some people have a hard time getting rid of the digestate. If you do it right, if you're smart enough and you put everything together, you can actually make it a viable product. So it's got some risk to it. Our venture is to get revenues from the biomethane itself.
That was my question, if they are going to buy the biomethane for their own use.
No. It's, you know, the problem with biomethane is it's very expensive to produce. It really is. And it only works, this is getting back to my very first statement. Biomethane is only going to work if the political will remains in the EU to decarbonize. Because on a all-in cost, capital operating basis, it's probably 10 times the cost than producing a natural gas field, you know, 10 times. So we need a premium price for this biomethane. We need 4 times, you know, 4 times someone willing to pay 4 times the price for the biomethane over the same molecule, a methane molecule from a natural gas field. And the only reason they'll be willing to pay such a premium is that the carbon taxes are high and they need to decarbonize. So without that framework, without the idea of a compulsion to decarbonize and charge a premium to ensure that happens, biomethane has no business.
So you don't have a buyer for the biomethane?
What we're looking at is we're looking at the big players in Europe, and they're the only ones who can handle it. The big players in Europe, and our idea is to sell our gas at the flange, and for the buyer, they can figure out how they figure out the markets, whether they develop in Romania, because they haven't developed yet in Romania yet, or in Germany, Italy, France, Netherlands, you know, where they have a very well-developed biomethane market, whether they sell it there instead. But that will be their business. We'll say, we're selling you the gas at a certain price at the flange, and it's up to you to monetize it and commercialize it with the expertise that you have that we clearly don't. I would hope that one day, you know, Romania would develop a biomethane market, but currently it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. So third quarter next year, FID for the project with the Neagrar.
That's the first project, yeah. And we're hoping the second project will follow on, hopefully within 6 months of that.
Mm-hmm. The capacity for the second project, how big is it?
It's bigger. It's bigger. It's a much more ambitious operation. The one with Neagrar, for now, the 2 parties have agreed that we don't take any third-party feedstock. There is potential for third-party feedstock, but we're going to keep it nice and simple. Biohazard issues, commercial issues, technical issues. It's just Neagrar and ourselves. The second project assimilates from a much wider scope of suppliers, and that one I think will more than double. We haven't landed on it, but we'll probably more than double the capacity, making it one of the bigger projects in Western Europe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You said earlier that now we're moving to the wind offshore, so not very, I don't know, optimistic prospects about that. But as far as I remember, the initial study was for 3 giga, and now the results are for 6.
So what we said before we did any of our studies in detail is that we want to go ahead and start permitting our infrastructure because we know that permitting of offshore infrastructure could be the critical path on a schedule. And so we wanted to proactively start permitting our corridor and our onshore lands. And we picked a number that we thought was a reasonable number. We had some justification for the number of 3 gigawatts. Unfortunately, the offshore law came out and said you cannot permit ahead of getting a concession, which is an unfortunate development, and it really is too bad that we're there. So we had to stop our permitting. But in parallel, when we started to look at who would use our infrastructure, who would use our corridor, as I mentioned, what we came up with was about 6 gigawatts of potential wind developments. And in fact, we've high-graded one concession area of 1 gigawatt that really is superior to the rest as far as costs and yield and being in proximity to our corridor. So if it does work out, if offshore wind does take off in Romania, we really do think we have a front-running project. But just to give you the scope of the problem, when you look at the cost to develop, and let's look at onshore solar. Onshore solar is about $500,000 per megawatt. $500,000 per megawatt. Offshore wind is $4 million per megawatt. So that means it's 8 times the cost to develop to the capital for a megawatt. So why would you do it when Romania is so rich still in onshore solar and onshore wind potential? You probably don't until you've tapped those out, or the cost somehow realigns, or as in some countries do, the member state kicks in a feed tariff, some sort of a feed-in tariff, to make the whole thing work. Mm-hmm. But all of our projects, when we're looking at green energy, we don't look at on the basis that somehow the state, in our case Romania, is going to be kicking in feed-in tariffs, whether it's biomethane or offshore wind. We really look at these things on the basis that they'll work on their own, and if it does turn out that they start to offer those, that's going to be helpful for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the CCS project might be a sooner option than the wind offshore?
Yeah, I know for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, offshore wind is going to be such a long game, even if it is viable, because of the process that has to go through with finding the concessions offshore to offer, going through a tendering process. It's going to be that's a long story. Carbon capture, the way we're looking at it is if that infrastructure is available and we're not post ANA, then ANA reservoir, we could actually have a carbon capture project maybe in the mid-2030s, maybe 2032, okay. 2033. And as I mentioned before, unlike the offshore wind, which has a real struggle financially, economically, when we benchmark our carbon capture story from capture, transport to storage in a reservoir, it's really a very, very good. It's an amazingly good project, and so I think it's got a high chance of being developed.
Okay, what capacity could it have?
Well, the reservoir looks like it's about 30 million tons, and we look at it that, initial studies, engineering studies say that per well, we could inject 1 million tons per well per annum. So we have 4 wells in the Anna Reservoir, which we understand we can recomplete, which is a very cost-effective way of doing it. So we could potentially do 4 million tons per annum with a capacity of reservoir capacity of 30 million tons. So it's a decent project.
Okay, I just have 2 more minutes. If my video producer is kind, but just very shortly, is this safe after you put the carbon there? You just lock it in and everything is fine for the environment, for the dolphins, for...
This is an excellent question. It's a big issue. The integrity of the seal of the injection, because it's got to last 1,000 years. I mean, it's got to have integrity. This is why certain reservoirs don't make sense in my mind. I think it's a struggle to do an onshore storage because just the concern of the inhabitants of whether this thing's going to work. The other is, I mean, some of the reservoirs have lots and lots of old legacy wells, and where they drilled with a lot of integrity and cased correctly and cemented in place, and can they last 100, 1,000 years? So when you look at those dynamics, this is where part of the reason why Anna looks so good. These are high integrity wells, and remember, we're producing pure methane. No H2S, no asphaltenes, no waxes, no nasty stuff. So the infrastructure, the tubulars down there are in great shape, and they're still relatively new. But it's if you have very few wells and you drill them with high integrity, and we drilled them never to come back to them again to do workovers. So we're going to stress test all those assumptions. Will be stress tested by people in the permitting stage, because the point you raise is a good one, and we're up for that test. And you have to make sure that the reservoir itself, it's called caprock integrity, which we're doing those tests now to ensure that it can hold this gas. Well, it held the methane for 1 billion years, or maybe 1 million years. I'm not a geologist. I can't remember the time frames of these things. It's probably millions of years. So it's already proven its worth. So it's on these bases that I think that the fact that we're offshore, we're away from lands, and that we have a high integrity reservoir, we have a high integrity infrastructure, we have very few legacy wells. The reservoir has proved itself to be gas tight. I really do think we have a good project. And if our project doesn't fly, I don't see how anyone else's will.
Well, thank you very much. So no time, no questions from my side. Maybe we will have the chance to talk on another show about your plans for 2026 and talk some more about the CCS project, which is very interesting. Okay, thank you very much
I hope
for
in 2026, Roxana, we'll talk about FID on those projects.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much for being our guest. And we will see each other soon with another guest at Czech Bank Pentru Afaceri Românești.